teaching a class and no one's in the first row. You're welcome to come on up. Good morning, I'm Katharine Strunk. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Education, and I'm incredibly excited to be here with you all today. This is a day of firsts for me, my first homecoming at Penn, my first time meeting many people here, and my first time hosting a community-wide event in our beautiful new building expansion. And if you know me at all, you know I like a good party, so this will not be the last. I would like to first extend all of my thanks to the students and alumni, faculty and staff, Penn citizens, parents, partners, advocates, all of our community members who are committed to improving lives through education. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, shares the belief that access to quality education is the path to a brighter future. A future that does things like inspires children to be curious learners, encourages teenagers and young adults to think critically and ask tough questions, prepares a workforce able to meet and exceed tomorrow's needs, and ensures that all of us, from pre-K to gray, have the opportunities and support to thrive in an increasingly interconnected world. Thank you. Great. My grades is covered. Even though I've only been here for a few months, I've already seen firsthand how our remarkable community comes together to work towards solutions to mitigate societal challenges, from the declining teacher pipeline to the rise in hate speech, and including the topic we're here to talk about today, which is addressing the mental health crisis for learners across the lifespan. Most of you may know that I'm the parent of 2 middle schoolers. I'm also a leader of the School of Education and an educator myself. So I can think of absolutely no more important conversation to be having today with no better panel than to have this conversation. So I'll do a quick set of introductions. Dr. Ariane Thomas is in the middle here. She's a licensed. Ariane brought her support crew, apparently, her family. Is a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice with over a decade of experience in Philadelphia and the surrounding communities. At Penn GSE, she is the director of the professional counseling program. She's a lecturer in educational practice, and she's many hats, associate director for professional training, and she's also like all of our cheerleaders, so we appreciate that. Dr. Thomas earned degrees in both psychology and law, and that joint expertise uniquely positions her to address the complex intersections of mental health, ethics, and social justice. Dr. Benoit Dubé is Penn's inaugural Chief Wellness Officer, which I think says a lot about Penn that we have a Chief Wellness Officer. He's also Associate Provost and Associate Professor of Clinical Psychiatry at the Perlman School of Medicine. He's overseen the creation of a new integrated wellness division at the university, bringing together previously siloed clinical entities to form a student-centered, holistic organization whose purpose is to support students' physical and emotional needs as they navigate their academic journey at Penn. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Noémie Pertel. Her name is actually pronounced differently, but I cannot pronounce the beautiful French pronunciation. You want to give it a go so I don't mess it up?
Right. Is it on? It's Noémie Pertel, but you got it.
Okay,
Wonderful.
Working on it.
Thank you for trying.
Noémie is the CEO of the Institute for Global Flourishing, and is a senior fellow and founding chair for the Economics of Wellbeing and Global Human Flourishing Workforce Group at Harvard University's Human Flourishing Network. I'm proud to say she is also a Penn GSE alum. Her doctoral dissertation examined workforce flourishing, engagement, burnout, and mental health in more than 122 countries. Noémie is an international consultant, researcher, and executive resilience coach for global financial, legal firms, and government institutions through her consulting firm, and she's also the founder and CEO of the Center for Positive Leadership. Everyone here wears multiple hats, clearly. Together, we'll explore solutions, strategies, and policies that promote mental well-being for learners at every stage of life. And I believe that you all saw some cards being passed out, and we have more that can circulate. And so I invite you to submit questions if you could help us engage in this dialogue. I think 2 of our fabulous master students, can you wave your hands, Omar and Alexa? Great. They will be walking around to offer question cards, and they can collect those question cards back from until 11:30 when I'll stop that so I can look at them and we can ask questions of our panel. So thank you for being here today. Let's turn our attention to this fantastic panel. I gotta get my question card. I'm going to start this one with a question for everyone. Maybe we can just start with Benoit and move on down. This panel is called the Addressing the Mental Health Crisis for Learners Across the Lifespan, shaped in part by the U.S. Surgeon General calling mental health the defining public health crisis of our time. There have always been people who needed mental health services, so should we be calling this moment a crisis?
This is a very interesting question, and it really underscores the importance of the words that we use. Language is a powerful tool, not only to better understand, but also to offer solutions. And I think that starting with this question is pivotal, because if it's a crisis, then that means there's an urgency around a problem. But if we take a step back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were talking about a mental health crisis. So if that's the case, why haven't we changed our language? And if it's the same problem that perpetuates over the last 5 or 10 years, so does that mean that this is our new normal? The impact of using the word crisis has two negative consequences. One, if we label this as a crisis, we're actually scaring away people who could be part of the solution. People who will falsely believe that because this is a crisis, you need to have special training and you need to be a specialist in order to help resolve the challenge that really plagues everyone. The second consequence about calling this a crisis is over the last 10 years, since there has been an ongoing challenge with people feeling anxious and people feeling depressed or less hopeful, we've pathologized normal emotions. We've given people the wrong impression that feeling anxious is not normal and is a problem and requires access to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. That is not the case. It is normal and appropriate in many circumstances to feel sad. It is normal and appropriate in many circumstances to feel anxious when there's uncertainty, apprehension, like we are wired this way, right? Like it is not pathological to experience these. So by labeling this a crisis, if we all acknowledge that the world has become more challenging, then we're doing ourselves a disservice because we are eliminating or overshadowing the first line responder that is all of us. Supporting one another is the first line intervention. We all have a role to play and the ability to be part of the solution by listening and sharing and validating and creating community. So while calling it a crisis is great clickbait and it got everyone's attention, there's also there's a flip side to it, right? Because inadvertently, by wanting to alert everyone to the situation, we may have scared away people who could be part of the solution, and we've sent the wrong message about anxiety and depression, and we've pathologized normal emotions. Now I'll stop here. I have lots more to say, but I think I'm thankful that you're asking this as a first question to set the stage for this discussion.
Thank you. Ariane, what do you think?
Excuse me, as a clinician who's been doing this for quite some time, when I think about the words trauma and I think about the word crisis, I immediately, I pushed back on how frequently those words were integrated into like everyday conversations. I thought, these are the things we talk about in clinical settings. We think about these things and we think about responding to them as clinicians. And then over time, I realized that they did just become a part of our daily parlance, probably because in many ways, in the past few years, we've all sort of as a global human race, we've shared some crises, we've shared some trauma. And people come to these with different experiences, different histories, different resilience factors. And so I sort of reframed the use of those words for myself. Instead of thinking about it as just, this is about how clinicians respond, I think to myself, we're all in this together. Different people experience aspects of trauma and periods of crisis throughout a lifespan. We've all experienced those things. So the question that I presented to myself is essentially that how do we as a community respond to these as opposed to just clinicians responding? We each have ways of responding, and it also, it's a call to us to see each other's humanity. right? When we think about the fact that in the past, the words crisis and trauma have been centered around the idea of mental illness, right? As opposed to mental health and well-being, and that being across a sort of a spectrum. And so in the past, when we thought about it as mental illness, we could say, that's what those people experience. I'm okay. I have things, I go places, I go to vacation, I take care of my kids every day. That's sort of, we othered the experience of trauma and crisis. And so now, the fact that the words are used more regularly, I welcome that, and I take that as an invitation for us to respond, not clinically, but communally, right? And to respond in the same way that we respond to things that happen around us, to show up for people, to listen, to hear, to find empathy, to understand that while we may not know exactly what another person is experiencing, pain is universal, suffering is universal. And so being able to understand that helps us to have a different sense of everybody's humanity. And I think that just lets us show up without a whole bunch of letters behind our name, and just as human beings to care for the people around us.
Helpful, thank you. How about you, Noémie?
Thank you. So language is really powerful, and so is measurement. So I think that the call that the U.S. Surgeon General put out in April to call this a crisis was also a time of opportunity. So it's to realize, yes, bringing forth, there is a problem. There is something happening. Last year, we saw some of the first research that showed that young people were experiencing a decline in mental health systematically over time. It was the first time we really saw a big shift. What implications does that have in our schools, in our families, communities, and in the workforce, and for times to come? So I think that it's a situation of an and, right? Yes, there is a challenge that we are all facing, and it is impacting people. There are changes that we see. What is the opportunity? Now, this word crisis is interesting because as human beings, we have an inborn negativity bias. So our brains light up when we see danger. It's part of how we protect ourselves and we take care of our collective communities. And so, yes, this is a charged word, and so is mental illness and mental health. So there are positive ways that we can frame it in terms of resiliency, in terms of positive sort of post-traumatic growth as one phenomenon. And I think there's a lot of talk around toxic positivity that we hear, right? So can we also normalize it being okay to not be okay? And also helping people move through that, and whose role is it? So we're gonna talk more about that, but I think there are no easy answers, but a lot of opportunities together that we can solve this, address it.
Thank you, and you just set me up for my next question, so I appreciate that. And you've all talked about being part of the solution and the community aspect of this, and it's not just about mental health professionals, but about all of us together. So who is responsible for creating a solution to this mental health crisis, if you call it a crisis? And how do we see the future of mental health support evolving in educational institutions and in workplaces? How about we start with you, Noémie?
Sure. So I think there are different layers in our society, and we all wear different hats, as we were discussing earlier. So whether it's within your family and having conversations and holding space to actually connect with one another, in your communities with your friends and checking in on one another, you know, the power of a genuine how are you and holding space and listening is really transformative. And then in our educational institutions, you know, like holding that space to hear one another, to really focus on the human skills. If you look at the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, you'll notice that the top 10 skills, 8 of them are human skills. So while some of them are the rise of technology and AI, it's the human skills that really allow us to make the most of these technologies. And they come down to factors like empathy and compassion and listening and critical thinking. And so how are we holding the space in our educational institutions to do that? But oftentimes we think of learning as ending when you're done with schools, or you know, we emphasize the degrees. But we go into the workforce, and oftentimes that's the place where we continue to learn. That's where lifelong learning happens. We get trainings, we get development, and nowadays people are wanting more from the workplace. It's not just a place where you pick up a paycheck, but it's a place where people are expecting, and particularly young people as they enter the workforce, to fulfill higher order needs. Needs for connection, for learning, for growth, for autonomy. And so whose responsibility is it? Is it the individual who are charging with maintaining their well-being, their health, and their resilience through skills building? That's one. Is it the employer and the workplace to create the resources and the culture where people can access it? That's two. What about our communities? And I'd say there's a lot of controversy and debate around this, but I think the answer lies in the both, right? It's and. It's in our educational institutions, it's at home, it's in the workplace, and it's the collective with each other.
Ariane, what do you think?
So I'm thinking about this in terms of children in K through 12 institutions, and I think back to pre-COVID and how lots of schools, when they had a mental health situation or a challenge with a child that they felt was grounded in mental health issues, they liked to outsource those. Send the child to go and the parents to go look for a therapist in the community or get evaluated or an assessment. And post-COVID, kids came back and they were struggling. Learning was lost, emotional development was lost, the ability to converse and communicate, and frankly, I think just play was lost. And so I don't think schools had the opportunity anymore to outsource it. Now they really had to figure out a way to respond on-site within a school community to the mental health and well-being needs of students. And I think what that's called upon is for us to first educate teachers differently around a variety of different things that affect a child's development, but also to ask teachers to step outside of the pressures that we put on them to deliver grades, to deliver information, to produce just academic proficiency, and also to be able to model what it is to listen, to be empathic, to see children for the full, whole, complete human beings that they are, and to be responsive to that. So to say, how are you feeling today? Check-ins. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Are you hungry? Did you get enough sleep last night? Just to understand how kids are showing up, because if those basic things aren't met, if those basic needs aren't met, then those math problems aren't gonna make a lot of sense, right? So education has had to sort of expand its meaning and go beyond just information and worksheets to educating the whole human being and really being empathic to the fact that kids are showing up with lots of different needs and deficits that have to be met at times in the classroom. It does put a lot of responsibility on our teachers, and I hope that, and I've been thinking a lot about doing some work around creating a curriculum that helps to educate teachers a lot more on how to respond to the emotional needs that kids show up with and still be able to be effective as educators and to think of education more broadly. I think our kids and our schools in general will benefit from a broadening of what we understand in terms of what education actually is.
Thank you, and I want to make sure we turn to Benoit, but first please make sure that if you're writing cards to get those in to our two folks walking around. Benoit, what is your response?
So it's really interesting as I'm listening to you talk about the importance of teachers. I think that the role of the teacher in the K-12 sphere is a lot easier to conceptualize. But when it comes to the teachers in the higher education realm, we hire teaching faculty because of their content expertise. And then there's disconnect between what we would like our students to benefit from, like this continued relationship with a teacher. But that's not how we recruit teaching faculty. We recruit them because they are trailblazers in their respective disciplines, and that's what we want. So how do we bridge those two responsibilities, cutting edge knowledge, but also humanizing and imparting life skills that are different? The incoming first-year student in college still has life skills to learn. And I would say, not unlike the third grade student or sixth grade student, developmentally, there are life skills that are appropriate to be taught. And there's a disconnect in the higher education world as to, well, whose responsibility is it? So is it the physics professor? Is it the English professor? Or is it the wellness office at the university? And there is, if you ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers. So the solution here is partnership. So the wellness office at the higher education institution needs to partner with the schools, needs to partner with the offices for student success, so that if there are many people who collaboratively have that shared goal of imparting life skills, then ultimately those life skills will be taught, whether in the classroom, by the physics professor, or the professor of dental medicine. And I use that as a specific example because, to their credit, the School of Dental Medicine actually requires all of its teaching faculty to undergo eye care training, which is essentially a homegrown active listening program that we have here that we offer to all members of the Penn community. But in order to have a faculty appointment at Penn Dental Medicine, you must also, in addition to have content expertise, also go to a skills building class to become an active listener, so that if the dental student in the classroom brings in life worries, they are not going to simply outsource to someone, but they can at least be a first-line respondent, listener, and connector to resources when and if appropriate.
Thank you. Those are really helpful ways, I think, to think about the solutions that we should be considering. And so I guess I want to be a little bit more concrete. So I'll start with Ariane. What strategies specifically do you think educators can employ to create a supportive and inclusive learning environment that promotes positive mental health for their students?
So, going back to the answer I gave previously, I think sometimes the day with especially smaller children needs to start with understanding what that child or how that child is showing up in the classroom. I think checking in, but also teachers taking the time, and I know, again, I'm putting a lot on teachers, but I would love it if teachers started to realize that educating a child means sort of understanding the context in which that child functions once they leave the school. So connecting and understanding the family structure that the child exists in, understanding the different stressors that are affecting the family at different points throughout a school year, check-ins with the family as well. So using parent-teacher conferences or just basic outreach periodically to understand what's affecting the child and how the child is showing up for you. So I just want to share a really quick example of a miss that happened in my own life. I have a 14-year-old son, and he grew up in a multi-generational household for his entire life. And then earlier this year, we lost my mother. And his teachers, and it was a long process of her health decline, and he went through that with me, and he saw me struggle with different things, and I saw him struggle with different things, and it was a challenge over the past couple of years. And his school administration and his teachers couldn't understand why he was distracted, even though I shared with them very openly what our family was going through. And they spent a lot of time wanting to get assessments, looking for a diagnosis to explain what was going on with him, as opposed to offering supports, as opposed to checking in with him and reaching out to him. And it was a miss. And ultimately, he started off this school year, and he's having an incredible year, and he's doing wonderfully, and he's focused, and he's energetic, and he's excited about being in school. And they're seeing a different side of him, and I'm definitely going to speak to them because I want them to understand that what they missed was a family challenge. A family challenge that was an opportunity for the school to sort of wrap their arms around this child and just support him in his learning as he struggled with it for a little bit, as opposed to trying to pathologize it. And so recognizing, again, child development isn't just about stages. It's also about the way that children experience things that they don't control. And so understanding that, I think, and really understanding the broadness of a child's experience, those are some concrete areas where I think teachers can be further educated and more responsive. And I think educators like myself would like to do some work around that moving forward.
That's really helpful. And I'm going to go a little off script because I'm going to combine this question with one from our audience for Benoit. So you talked about K-12 challenges, but Benoit, you're obviously dealing with a different population of slightly older learners. So what specific challenges face them? And then the question from the audience is, how is Penn actively supporting faculty to become these kinds of first responders and recognizing and appreciating these kinds of struggles that students face?
Okay. I welcome the question. Thank you. So one of the challenges, as an institution, we've had to adjust and adapt to the evolving needs of our learners. So a first-year student that started school a few months ago has different needs than a first-year student who started school 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And we've had to adapt and adjust. And we do so by doing needs assessments. We use the National College Health Assessment. We also talk to students. We have advisory boards. And two of the most pressing challenges that land in my office are loneliness and worry, anxiety, an inability to tolerate frustration. That's all wrapped into the anxiety label. So we develop programs to increase frustration tolerance. We've also promoted all of the social functions, groups, the communities that students can either start themselves or join at our suggestion. So how can faculty be part of the solution? So the eye care training that I mentioned previously is offered to everyone. We have regularly scheduled training sessions. Anyone can register, including, and hopefully faculty, and actually they do. But we will also take requests. So if a department or a school says, hey, we would like to offer eye care training to all of our faculty, then we will work with that school or that department, and we will pick a date and a time, and we will tailor the training and the case examples we use for our target audience. So we work in partnership with them. We offer things, and we know that not everybody is aware that we offer these things. Hopefully we'll spread the gospel and let everybody know about this, but it is available to faculty. We want to partner and be part of the solution and create an army of wellness warriors so that we can all support in our different ways our students.
I love the term wellness warriors. I'm going to use that for our counseling faculty in particular, who've been wellness warrioring for us. But Noémie, I want to turn it to you and think about this in the workforce. And so we're seeing this play out as well, the talk of the great resignation or quiet quitting. So what can employers, and I'm particularly interested in hearing your answer, what can employers do to prevent burnout and support their employees' mental health?
Thank you. So I say we are all connected, and the well-being or lack of well-being of people translates to business outcomes. It translates to organizational performance. It translates to society, right? And the burdens that we face as a collective. But in our individualistic society, it can be really easy to just focus on the self, on the one individual. And I think that's part of our problem of loneliness, right? And the lack of checking in. And of course, we have greater technology. And yet, if you look at where we live, we're surrounded by people, right? There are people all around, but we know that that's not what loneliness is about. It's not enough to be surrounded, but it's how you feel in company of the people around you. And that comes down to culture. So when we look at burnout, there are 3 different components. One is emotional exhaustion, which can manifest physically. So whether or not you feel emotionally exhausted, you might start to have migraines or chronic pain or anxiety, or maybe you get sick often. And in the workplace, people aren't necessarily going to tell you that they're struggling. And it's not always open in the culture of the industry or the workplace or your team, because we don't always have that trust. So that's one thing to look out for. How are your people doing when it comes to their energy and their physical health? The other component is compassion fatigue. So whether or not someone is present, like your son in the classroom, well, what is driving that? What are they facing? What other burdens to their sense of purpose, compassion, and their normal empathetic self? Like, what's going on there? And so when people start to feel that and they don't care as much, that's a sign. The third one is cynicism. So when you start to look at everything and question it, and someone is like asking how are you, but you don't really trust that they care, that's another sign too. So those passive aggressive comments. And we see that in the workplace, especially when people feel like they have no voice and no control. So zooming out, being able to recognize that and see the bigger picture, then we can look at culture. And it really comes down to caring culture. And caring culture has to do with a couple of aspects. Trust. Do you trust the people around you? And in the workplace, that's influenced not only with the industry again, but also it's the geographic location. So it's influenced by our trust in our politicians, in higher institutions, in society. So how's trust? Do people feel like they're treated fairly, with respect, human dignity? And there's a lot of science around this. So I'm drawing on the science from Harvard Shine, where I'm an affiliate research scientist. But I think it comes down to Dr. Maya Angelou's words, which is, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And so as leaders, as educators, as people caring for others, how do we tune into ourselves and what presence are we showing up with? And that's of great impact. So
That's so important in every culture, whether it be a workplace or a school or a university. I'm going to take us to some more of the questions from the audience, and this one I thought was very important for all of you. Can you talk about the impact of technology and social media on mental health, and how can we mitigate the negatives and enhance the benefits of technology and social media? Maybe we'll start with you, Benoit.
So for us, the impact has been we needed to learn how to do TikTok videos if we wanted our students to know about what we were doing. So we had to learn a new skill. But we also had to develop teaching modules about moderation and self-agency and doom scrolling. And we also needed to develop resources for doxing and cyberbullying and trolling. So we've had to adjust what we offer our students to meet their needs. We weren't talking about these things just a few years ago. What we've learned from our learners is that social media also creates false expectations, also creates fear of missing out, and we need to develop antidotes to this. Now there is a rate limiting step, which is what we can tell our students. You need to offer yourself brain rest. You need to put your phone down. You need to or should consider limiting the number of hours that you're on social media. We have no control over whether they will choose to do so. And it's about reminding them of their agency in this situation.
I think about this in terms of the little ones, and even the very little ones are making TikToks. And again, as an old head, I was pushing back on social media like, oh no, I don't want any parts of this. And as a mother of a 14-year-old, you really don't have that privilege. So you have to I had to wake up and accept that this is an important part of K through 12 culture. And yet, it is a really damaging aspect, especially what we are learning from research is that it's really harming our adolescent and pre-adolescent girls in particular. A lot of challenges around how they view themselves, how they compare themselves, and I actually think that that's not just about adolescent girls, but about lots and lots of young folks comparing themselves and what they do and what they have across social media platforms. And so one of the things I really encourage, and actually I do a lot myself, which is why I tend to be very busy, is to try to keep some social media involved in his life, and some social media involved in our lives as mother and child. We play around. I get on the Snapchat, right? I do the little faces and stuff. Don't laugh because I called it the Snapchat. Like, I do the faces. I play games around it, I engage in it, and I engage with it because that's where he is, that's what he and his friends do. I want to be a part of that. But I also want him to know, how do you engage in real life? So we get in the car and we go places and look at people. I want him to have conversations, to engage, to have conflicts and know how to figure out a way through those conflicts, to play, to lay in grass, right? To do the things that you did before we had this little thing that we were staring at all the time. And so a little bit of balance, I think, as opposed to rejecting and incorporating the phone into what we do. So maybe if we're laying in the grass, we're taking some pictures, right? Or maybe even sending pictures to people to share what we're doing. Not rejecting social media, but giving it a place in life where there's a little bit of balance around it. And also making sure that I want him to have a sense of himself, and I want all kids to have a sense of themselves as to who they are beyond what they've posted. And so some of that is about conversation, it's about identity, and starting to develop that at much earlier stages than perhaps we were required to do. So we're having much more mature conversations with kids K through 12, starting very young, about who you are, what you love, what matters to you, and what's important outside of Snapchat and Instagram.
I'm actually going to move to a different question for you, Noémie, because I think it came in and it's really important. So how can an adult, so someone who's in the workplace, with an individual, with what they're calling an invisible disability like ADHD, improve their opportunity for meaningful employment and meaningful engagement that leads them to a thriving career?
That's a great question. So I think we're coming to a place now where people are having dialogue about those invisible disabilities, the things that we didn't talk about in the past, that the culture was like, you tough it up and you just move through. And now we have greater understanding of neurodiversity and people's needs, and that all disabilities are not visible. And I think we still have a long way to go as a society to be understanding of the variations of brain health and differences, and to really appreciate them, as we can see in so many different aspects of our society right now playing out. So definitely another area of opportunity. But I'm thinking a bit about knowing yourself, and this connects with technology as well. How do you use technology purposefully and meaningfully? And so one of the things with the doom scrolling and everything else is, back to our brains, we are designed to go for the dopamine hits. And that's what we get from technology oftentimes. It's a quick result. And so using technology to your benefit, if you have ADHD or other conditions, and also limiting it. So knowing that edge, it's like how much is still a good thing and how much is too much. And there are apps now that you can use to help with your focus, for example, so ADHD specifically, where you can turn off certain apps. It's about curating the information that's coming your way. But also there's research on physical movement. So the power of physical movement, if you look up John Brady's research at Harvard Medical School, really engaging in even just 20 minutes of cardiovascular activity before the school day, before the work day, enhances your brain's ability to learn and to grow. And so it's really powerful, and I think we've forgotten the place of, the basics. It's so easy to sit down, and even, our workouts are designed around technology and our phones and gamified. So use that to your advantage is something I'd say. And then, to replace technology's deleterious effects, think about how can I boost healthy sources of dopamine for myself. So getting outside, getting fresh air, eating well, spending time with people face to face, because it's so easy to turn off our phones, but we don't turn off their impact oftentimes, right? Like we can cancel or delete somebody from our profiles, but we don't know how to actually work through and resolve those things. When you show up in the workplace, at some point, you might encounter a person face to face and lose those skills. So practicing getting uncomfortable just a little bit so that you can grow just like you would go to the gym, there's value in that. Those are some thoughts. Thank you.
very helpful responses. As a parent and an educator, I'm actually like taking mental notes in my head so I can use it. So selfishly, this has been very valuable for me. I have a question specifically for Ariane. So in K-12, what are some good strategies or practices to convince parents that they also play a big role in their child's overall academic, social, and emotional growth, and to promote school-parent collaboration?
I think a lot of parents tend to want to, or tend to think that maybe they don't have a lot to contribute when it comes to the academic development, other than homework. And I think it's important for schools and parents to be closer in partnership. Sometimes I feel like there's a sense that this is what I do here, and you take care of things over there. And the reality is that during those early stages of a child's development, all of the settings are important, and it's important that all of the settings be communicating about how the child is functioning. So, if we're doing an evaluation for something like ADHD, we talk about how a child is functioning across settings. We have to understand it. We can't just look at what's happening in the school and put a diagnosis on a child. We have to also know, do we see some of these same presentations at home or in the community? And so we're saying in terms of a diagnosis, we need to know across settings, but we also need to think about this in terms of positive functioning and positive engagement. So teachers and parents are the best partners and essential partners when it comes to a child's functioning. I think one of the things that happens is sometimes people don't start to have conversations in that partnership until they see problems. And so what I would encourage is that we start to establish touchstones throughout an academic year where parents and teachers talk about, and not just in parent-teacher conferences, because that really has a tone, right? There's a sense about what that's about. That's about grades are coming out soon, right? So let's talk about where you are. But beyond that, conversations that are brief and just productive around how's a child doing? What do you need from us as a school community? Because I also say to my school counselors that they're not just there to respond or react to what a child brings to you on any given day. The school, the community, the parents, the whole setting, that's your client. So if counselors can be part of the navigating of those engagements and those conversations, if counselors can sort of facilitate conversations throughout the year about how a child is functioning in a variety of different settings, I think that would give us the opportunity to be proactive about supporting kids as opposed to being reactive and only speaking when there are problems. And that ongoing engagement, I think, is something that my school counselor trainees are going to be very, very good at.
I have total faith that they will. I want to take it to the higher ed level, Benoit. And so we're in loco parentis here, right? And so we are, in theory, parents are not as involved as they would be in K-12. But how do you think about the partnership between faculty and other folks on campus and maybe families and parents and students to help make sure that the students are getting the support that they need?
So everything we do here is a teachable moment. And when I say we, I'm referring to the wellness team. So outside of the classroom, when we intervene with students, we view it as a partnership. We view it as an opportunity to build bridges between the student and the faculty if there's an academic issue so that they can troubleshoot together, or building a bridge or opening a door for a conversation with the parents about a undesirable health outcome, substance misuse, for example. So everything is a teachable moment. It's not always about grades, not about punishment, but it's about learning life skills in partnership, in and out of the classroom. Those are the guiding principles that we use when we intervene with students through the wellness team.
Very helpful, and I think this is probably the last question, and it's for all three of you, so maybe we'll do a speed round, maybe a couple minutes. This is not a speed round question, by the way. How can we make mental health checks as routine as, say, going to the dentist every 6 months? Noémie, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, so I think it needs to start with ourselves. So checking in with ourselves. Can we do this on a daily basis? So in the morning, pair it with another habit when you're brushing your teeth, when you're getting ready, when you walk through into another setting. And then once you're in tune with yourself and you know the energy you're bringing and you're conscious of that, checking in with others. So whether they're on your team, people you work with, your best friend in school, someone in the classroom, someone in every different setting, because it's really that power of human connection and friendship that also determines whether people are happy or not in a particular workplace. It really comes down to human connection. Thank you.
Are we speaking about K through 12 or just in general?
Why don't you focus on K-12? That would be actually super helpful for this audience.
Yeah, I'm thinking just about teaching children to be able to first self-reflect. The check-ins that we ask teachers to do in the morning when they meet with a child, teaching children to use that language as well, to not be afraid to say, I feel something, or I'm worried, I'm concerned, or I feel really happy. Teaching kids about the language of emotion so that they can use it more freely, both in positive and in challenging situations. And then making that a part of just the everyday conversations that we have and not being afraid of saying where you're vulnerable or where you're feeling actually really strong. And teaching kids to do some of that checking in, I think, is really important as well. It will teach empathy, connectedness, and compassion.
Great. How about at the higher ed level here at Penn?
So first, since we're comparing this to going to the dentist, we have to acknowledge that not everybody loves going to the dentist. So there is a challenge in what you're asking us to do, right? And I think while it seems easy on the surface, it is not. Because it requires courage and vulnerability, which Noémie talked about, like we need to check in with ourselves. That means that our teaching faculty need to be willing to check in with themselves before they ask their students to check in with themselves at the beginning of class. They need to role model this for them, and that is a challenge. Institutionally, I can tell you we have instituted the patient health questionnaire, 2-question, the PHQ-2 for all of our student health visits. So institutionally, we have opportunities to do so, but in the classroom, I think is a bigger lift. It is doable, and we will see continued improvement, but we just have to see this as a long game to manage our own expectations about what we can accomplish.
I think that seems like a good way to end it, as mental health as a long game for all of us through K-12 on into our adulthood. So can we take a moment to thank our amazing panelists? And we didn't get to everyone's questions, so I'm sorry about that, but maybe if you email them in, we've got the ones that we didn't answer, and you can always email them in, and we'll try to figure out a way to get some answers for you. So thank you all very much for coming. I think we have a reception outside. I believe we have a mashed potato bar, which makes me think that I should have brought my 2 11-year-olds. So please enjoy, and thank you all for coming.